This is your complete camera comparison between the iPhone 16 Pro and the GoPro Hero 13 Black. The reason being, when Apple announced the new iPhone 16 Pro, it added a brand new 120 frame per second 4K mode that could be used for all sorts of action.
Introducing 4K at 120 frames per second. There's a quarter speed playback, a new half speed option, or you can bring it back to normal speed.
Now I'm going to put these two cameras through a whole bunch of tests, both action and non-action alike, to see how well they perform. Now, given the highlight new feature on the iPhone 16 Pro from a video standpoint is that 4K 120 frame per second video, let's just jump straight into it. It is now time for the Cannonball contest. Our first contestant is up on the rocks right there, ready to roll. Now this is actually the second time we've done this. We tried this the other day, but we both agreed her first performance, her first day of performing, was not up to par from a Cannonball standpoint. So we're back at it again to give you the real deal. Now I want you to focus on a few things here. Number one being her Cannonball form, ensuring that she's actually hitting it with the most possible impact to create the biggest kerplunk possible. I would say that's an okay form, not great. Still, the underwater portion here is on point. Some really nice bubbling action going on there. Obviously, we should also be judging the camera quality and kind of comparing how those two look. To me, the iPhone has a little bit more blue hue to it versus the GoPro is a little more clear in terms of just that blue hue, a little more true to life, I would say. Now, of course, it's my turn. Again, you can judge the Cannonball quality here and then leave the comments down at the bottom there. I think my Cannonball definitely has more water explosion going from it. We don't have an underwater view of this one. Instead, you get a bask in the glory of that kerplunk that I made on the surface. Now, one final thought while I let you watch hers one more time from a judging perspective. If you are taking your iPhone into salt water, definitely give it a quick rinse afterwards, just so you can ensure that it's nice and clean of salt water. Also, you'll need to use wireless charging for a few hours until the iPhone port dries out. So just to demonstrate the difference between action mode and non-action mode, first, I've got these two cameras in the two different modes so you can see exactly what that looks like and how the action mode stabilizes the whole shot.
This is action mode. It uses the full sensor with more overscan and advanced roll correction to make video look incredibly stable when you're in the middle of the action, without having to carry extra gear like a gimbal.
So watch what happens when I tap the action mode button in the lower left-hand corner there. You'll see that it automatically changes to the 0.5x lens and also goes to 2.8K, down from 4K. I can tap into the 1x lens, but when I do that, it's substantially cropped compared if I turn off action mode. You'll see that it now has a much wider field of view, and turning it back on again, 0.5x lens as well as 2.8K. Okay, so who are we getting up to speed right now? Pay attention to the rightmost one. That's one without stabilization enabled. It's a wider view, but you can see it's more wobbly, especially right just then as we kick up a notch in terms of speed there, versus the other two are much more stable. Obviously, again, the GoPro giving a little bit wider perspective. And now we'll do it selfie style, just so you can see how the stabilization looks when we're a little bit closer up. Roll. Okay, that was our pull. Where are you? No, we're done. Done? No? Not done? I'm done. Now she's regretting her life choices. See? Don't overachieve. Never ends very well. Okay, it is time to test some underwater footage on these two cameras. Now some of you are like, hey, the iPhone's not waterproof, but it actually is. In fact, the iPhone 16 Pro is good down to 6 meters, or about 20 feet of waterproofing. Now for this first shot here, I've got the GoPro in linear mode, so that's basically its kind of non-fisheye look, and then the iPhone in the main lens. So this gives you a bit of a flatter look, but it's definitely much more cropped in. Here we go to super view on the GoPro and the widest possible setting on the iPhone. Note though, if I go to full screen, just how much wider this is on the GoPro compared to the iPhone, and then also how much better the color reproduction is on the GoPro. I was really surprised day after day of testing this, how good the GoPro did underwater compared to the iPhone. Definitely skewed more blue. You can see that again right here. And also actually in terms of the brightness, almost every single time we went out, the GoPro actually did better in these effectively lower light conditions underwater than the iPhone did. But we'll talk about real dark later on. Instead, let's get back up onto the land for a bit of riding. Now it is time for the mountain biking test, to which you're looking at this going, this looks pretty sketch. And haven't you learned by now, that's the theme of this video, is sketch. However, despite this being technically functional, we're not going to use this setup for the realsy part of the test here, because there's so much weight and heft on this that'll bounce a lot and it won't be good for anyone. So I'm going to run each one of these cameras individually after I show you how bad this is. And you can see after going nowhere whatsoever, it's already flopping. I do often flip it over so it's kind of hanging down. doesn't matter. It's the same effect at the end. So let me just swap into a single camera setup. And good news, I got a new mount for this, so now it's a little bit cleaner than before, and it should be basically as good as you're gonna get for iPhone to test harness. Now you can see here just how much more cropped in the iPhone is. You lose the majority of the handlebars, you lose the bike computer almost entirely, but it is giving a slight advantage in some of the stabilization because it's cropping in so much. And then here we are going back up the hill, just slightly uphill into the sun a little bit. I actually prefer this, probably a little more fun to watch. Colors should look a little more vibrant here. Still, at the end of the day, for most people, just the GoPro will mount better in a bike cycling situation than an iPhone. Okay, so for this next test, we are in the car right now to show how wide the cameras are. And this is really where you would see some of that difference, especially if you were filming from inside the car, had it at the dashboard, and you wanted that really wide perspective. In the case of the GoPro, it is on the Super View, which is one of the widest settings, not the widest it goes to, but one of the wider ones, versus the iPhone is on its widest possible setting in that wide lens. And really be kind of looking at how far left and right on the frame you can see before it gets cut off. That's kind of what you're trying to pay attention to. Of course, from a gimbal standpoint, the car is one giant gimbal, but we have bumps like that, so you can kind of see how things look as we go over those two bumps and how stable they are. But again, the tires, the vehicle, everything really just acts as one kind of stabilizer for both of these cameras. And now it is time to increase our stupidity level. We have here the DJI drone with some cameras we're going to try to stick on top. Now, I've learned my lesson over the last couple years. The very first year, I struggled to get this whole thing up in the air. The second year, though, I got the weight and balance figured out through some advanced zip tying techniques. Okay, it's a lot, Wally. We should go somewhere. Whee! So this third year, I didn't mess with it. I have not touched this drone in 1 year. So instead, we're gonna level it up and chase my wife with the drone and the cameras on top of it while she mountain bikes down this fun little trail. Now, as I said, we learned before last year that basically we can't put this whole thing on there. It's just simply too heavy. Now, some of you are like, well, why don't you just use the camera on the drone, smarty? Where's the fun in that, obviously? That got a little bit dusty, but it's successfully in there with the GoPro. Let's do a test run. One of the things I like about the Super View setting is it increases the feeling of speed through that wider perspective. Overall works really well in cycling scenarios. I'd say round one with the GoPro looks pretty darn cool. Now it's gonna get a bit more tricky with the iPhone because it's not gonna be as stable, but we're gonna make this work and it's gonna look awesome. Now for the iPhone, I've got the same mount I've been using all along, and I'm basically just mounting it and hoping for the best. The problem, of course, is that this mount is metal, so it adds more weight, and it's a super high center of gravity, so the whole thing is a wobble cake. But that's all right. Okay, the moment of truth. Can we get this thing in the air on the first attempt this time? Here we go. Oh, look at that. Again, a little bit dusty, but it's in the air. Now, it'll look tilted, but once we start flying, it'll be nice and straight. It is your time to go. Now, from a clarity and stabilization standpoint and avoiding the wobbles, all of this looks really good. The one thing you lack is that wider perspective, so it does make it feel a little bit slower than it actually is. And also, just of course, given the logistics of putting an iPhone on top of a drone, it makes it a little bit harder to control. I had a little more control and stability with the GoPro on top there. But hey, this worked. Keeping in mind the wide lens on the iPhone makes it feel further away than it really is, so I'm actually pretty darn close to her real wheel in some of these shots here. It's fascinating to watch. You have to keep it moving, otherwise it goes into crazy wobble mode like that. Oh, come on down. There we go. We are down. Okay, so it's nighttime now, and as you can see, there's really no competition whatsoever. The iPhone easily wins this category. No matter what I do in this particular scenario, the iPhone's going to win because the low light quality is just so much better on the iPhone than the GoPro. The GoPro, I'm literally disappearing from the frame as I go between the different lights here. The only exception to that is that the GoPro does have a cool like night star trail mode that you see right now, but beyond that, every single time, unless I'm right next to the light, the iPhone's gonna win. And even now, it's still gonna win. Ultimately, both of these cameras are great cameras. Just depends on what you're using it for. For day-to-day stuff, the iPhone's always in my pocket. It's always there. And generally speaking, for those day-to-day scenarios, it's gonna give me a better overall video and picture. Yet meanwhile, for the GoPro, it's better for action stuff. It mounts better, it's easier to use in those sorts of scenarios. And again, in those cases, it's generally gonna give me higher resolutions and better stabilization across those resolutions. Ultimately, it just depends on what you want and what scenario you're using it for. I use both of them all the time, and it's honestly as simple as that. With that, if you found this video interesting, useful, go ahead and get a like down at the bottom or hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. Have a good one.